So I was just getting ready, and I was looking down, and in the trash I saw that we have some fruit here from British Columbia. And I think that's fantastically horrible that we're getting our food from all over the world. It's so bad, it's so wrong. Some things from South America, some things from Canada, some things from, halfway around the world. You go to these stores and getting coconut water from Thailand, isn't it? Yes, we are. It's true. Okay, I have to move over near my computer. We're getting, yeah. Anyway, it's a mess. So, I'm going to go to chat. And we are going to continue from where we left off yesterday. And yesterday we were talking about pure devotional service. And yesterday we were talking about pure devotional service and being a pure devotee. Now I got to move this so you don't have to look at my clothes sitting on the dresser. So we talked about pure devotional service, that indicates what it means to be a pure devotee. And in this context of Rupa Goswami's definition, pure devotee means that you engage in service under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, and you engage only with the desire to please him. Then you're engaged in pure devotional service, and that is the broadest definition of pure devotee. Now, there are more strict definitions of pure devotee. That definition kind of incorporates everyone who follows teachings of Prabhupada and engages in pure devotional service. And therefore engages in pure devotional service. And the goal is pure devotional service, and the goal is to be a pure devotee. And the goal is not to satisfy our senses, but the goal is to satisfy Krishna's senses. So our goal is to give Krishna sense gratification. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's the goal of pure devotional service, that we can give Krishna sense gratification instead of giving that to ourselves, right? So that's an interesting thought, that we exist to give Krishna sense gratification. That's why we're here. I mean, that's the ultimate purpose. So we think of every sense we have, and we think, how could that sense give gratification to Krishna, instead of thinking how that sense can give my own sense gratification. Now, something we didn't discuss, but we may have discussed last week, but I'll just present this idea. We have when we talk about renunciation, we have two things which are going on simultaneously. We have our effort to be renounced, and renunciation that comes as a byproduct of bhakti. So ultimately, renunciation, according to our Shastra, Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayati Asu. Janayati Asu Bharagyam. That bhakti, as you know, produces knowledge and it produces detachment. Detachment is a byproduct. But the question will be that, what if renunciation doesn't come yet, because I'm not advanced enough for renunciation to be a byproduct? So then what do I do? What I do is I renounce. So there's two aspects to renunciation. One, we can say is forced, or you could say is artificial, but I don't want to say it's artificial because it's devotional. It's done in service to Krishna. And so in that sense, It's not artificial, it's an act of devotion. But the sense that it's artificial is that it's not a natural byproduct. You're doing it, you're renouncing something that you actually want. In higher states of Krishna consciousness, you lose the taste for that thing, that whatever that thing is that you shouldn't be, or it's not healthy to be attached to. You lose attraction for that. And that's natural as you advance in devotional service. But until you lose attraction for that, you can't engage in anything sinful, or you have to be detached. So you have to force that detachment. It's a recognition that I am attached and I have to control myself. But the point is that ultimately, to maintain that level of detachment over the long run, there has to be advancement which will produce taste. Because the taste will nullify that material attachment, because you have something better. So that is how it works. So sometimes there's a fear that maybe I'll become too detached, and you can never become, in a sense, too detached if it's real. Because detachment, you could become too detached if it's not real, then you're not balanced. There's an example, it's an interesting example about detachment. There's a river called the Falgu River. And what happens is when the river dries, or parts of the river that dry, if you actually just put your hand or dig up the sand, you'll see that it's not dry. There's actually, the river is underneath the sand. But externally it appears that there's sand. And that example is given of someone who's renounced. But if you dig a little deeper, underneath the renunciation, there's all kinds of material attachment. Now you might say, well, that sounds like me. This example is given to show that people who pretend or believe themselves to be renounced, some pretend just to show the public, and some actually believe they're renounced. But if you stir them up, if you put them in a situation where those desires could be fulfilled or aroused, then those desires become aroused, which means they're not actually renounced. So that's artificial. We don't want to be on that platform. That platform is thinking that I'm renounced. Now, I may be renouncing something, but I don't think that I'm renounced. But I know I'm renouncing because it's the right thing to do. And I know I have an attachment for it, but I renounce it, and that's different. But when I renounce it, thinking that I'm above it when I'm not, then that becomes a problem. Because you shouldn't, there's certain things that we should not renounce prematurely. There's some things we have to renounce. We have 4 regulative principles, so I have to renounce that. But there's some things we should not renounce prematurely. Otherwise, when we come in contact with those things, then we may engage in sinful activities. So some things we have to utilize. Wealth, women, followers, and so on. That if we renounce those completely before we're qualified, then we'll be like the Falgu River. And then in that situation, it'll come up there. There's stories of these Buddhist monks who come to teach Buddhism in the West. And they're coming in contact with young, beautiful girls, and some of them have a very difficult time dealing with that. Because that desire is still there, even though they live a renounced life. They didn't realize how deeply that desire is there. So I don't think we should ever underestimate that how attached we are. We should always be careful. But ultimate detachment, if you want ultimate detachment, if you want permanent detachment, if you want detachment on a solid basis, it's only going to come from advancing in Krishna consciousness, because Krishna consciousness is so deep, it's so relishable, it's so profound, it's so inspiring, that if you get a taste of it, if you get enough of a taste of it, and you get enough of a taste consistently, then you'll lose your taste for material life. And when we say consistently, that's a stage of nishta, where that taste is more consistent. Of course, ruchi is where it's even more consistent. But on the stage of nishta, you're not going up and down. So the advancement that you've achieved, you stay on that level, as opposed to one day good, one day bad. So that's something to look forward to. But the point of me talking about this is that if we're going to become truly renounced from everything that's an obstacle to pure devotional service, it's going to happen through our advancement in Krishna consciousness. And until it happens, that renunciation has to come by our determination, our commitments, our willpower, as we talked about yesterday. And that's just the way it is. But that willpower and that effort over time brings us to a higher stage of Krishna consciousness. And then, on that higher stage, we're not battling with these desires. We're just not attracted. They're not, it's how should I put it? It's, just imagine if today you spent like 4 hours with Krishna. You just went out with him. And you just hung out with him. And then you come back home and then you tell everybody, I've never met anybody like this. This was the most amazing, blissful, ecstatic 4 hours of my life. This was just incredible. If there's anything, if anything would be life-changing, I'm sure that would be life-changing. So you imagine you just spent 4 hours with Krishna. And now you look at everything in your life and everything in this world, and what does it look like? Well, one thing, it looks like you want to use it for him. But in terms of using it for yourself, it doesn't look attractive, because you realize how it's just dead matter. And how it's Krishna, your relation with Krishna is eternal, and it's blissful, and it's the solution to every problem you ever could possibly have, ever possibly will have, because it's your real position. So if you had that realization strongly, the detachment would naturally follow. You just would not be interested. So that's what happens as we advance in Krishna consciousness. That's going to happen to us. We're going to come to a point where things just become less and less interesting. And another way of looking at this, or another thought that I often have, is sometimes when things become interesting, like right now I'm getting a little sidetracked by the election. And actually I have no interest in politics. I never had any interest in politics, but somehow or other, I don't know why, I find this election so interesting, because both of the candidates are well, you know what they are. They're less than stellar. And there's so much dishonesty going on, and so much childishness and so forth. And it's, to me, it's interesting to see how low people have fallen. But anyway, it's a nice thought to think, okay, if I only had a week or two or even a month to live, would any of this be interesting to me? And immediately we would think, well, I'm trying to focus on my destination to go back to Godhead. So why would I focus on anything in this world if I'm getting ready to die? Everything in this world would seem pretty irrelevant, wouldn't it? And I think naturally we would think there's no reason to focus on it, but I should be focusing on my relationship with Krishna and preparing to go back to Godhead. That's what I should be doing with the rest of my life. And so I think that's easy to understand, that if any of us were in that situation, that I think things of this world would seem quite foolish. And I think we would think people are foolish to be absorbed in things of this world. And we probably would think, why are you all so absorbed? Don't you know that these things don't last? don't you know you're not going to be here in 50 years, or maybe 20 years, maybe 10 years? But we don't think that way in our daily life, and Prabhupada wants us to think that way. That's how he's training us to think. And if we think that way in our daily life, of course you can't think entirely that way, because you can't live like you're only going to live for a week, because then in a week or 2 or 3 you'll have no money, have no home. You won't make any effort to maintain yourself. So obviously we can't do that. But the other side of it, of giving importance to things in this world, that's the way we're supposed to live, isn't it? Isn't that what Prabhupada wants us to do? He wants us to look at these things of this world and say, what's so important or valuable about it if I can't engage it in Krishna's service? And it's a fact, but we don't always see it that way. Anyway, but my point is that consciousness comes by practicing devotional service. It'll happen. It's just a question of when. But as I've said many times, even though it may not seem like it's happening fast enough, or you may even question, is it ever going to happen? 2 things to consider. 1, what else would I do other than endeavor for that? Because that's the only thing which is worthwhile. And number 2, it happens, but it just happens slower than we want it to. But if you take to Krishna consciousness and you do it your entire life, it does happen. It does work. You do become attached to Krishna, even though it doesn't seem like it, even though it seems far away. But you do become attached to Krishna. But through that period of time when it's difficult, or through that period of time when you feel like, I don't know if it's happening, I don't know if I'll achieve perfection, that's the most difficult time. That's the time when we need the most determination. And let's say, even if you don't achieve perfection in this life, still, however far we advance, that's where we'll continue in our next life. So if we give it up now, then we just have to do all that work over anyway. So if you look at it that way, you see there's really no alternative to practicing Krishna consciousness, no matter what the result is that I get. There is no alternative. I just have to continue doing it, because gradually it will build up and it will start to take effect. And if you give up now, then when you're older, it's not going to have the same effect. It's not going to have the accumulative effect that it would have had if you continued. So even sometimes you can't see the effect is there. And the more you're trying to improve yourself, the more the effect is there, and the more the effect will be there, and it will be seen as you age, as the passions in your body and the attachments gradually subside. Just some of them subside just because the physical nature of the body changes, or just because you become older, your interests change. So hang in there, stick it out, do artificial, if your detachment is artificial, if it has to be artificial, then that's okay, as long as you know it's artificial. It's just not okay when you don't know it's artificial. When you think you're more detached than you are, then it'll catch up with you. That's the problem. And so I see that a lot of times when we're in a very good spiritual consciousness, then we feel very detached, and that's a symptom. But we may not be in heart detached. We may be detached by the mercy of the spiritual energy, by the mercy of good sadhana, by the mercy of the holy name. But we have to act accordingly to our level of advancement. Okay, allergies are hitting. So do you have any questions from our discussion yesterday? Before I go on, I will read something directly about prayer. But yesterday we had been talking about the definitions and nature of pure devotional service as a basis for our prayers, because we're praying for pure devotional service and we want to know what it is. So I said at the end of class yesterday that if you have any questions you can think about, then we can continue. We had ended yesterday's class by discussing the concept of sense gratification, and then I subtitled the class, When Sense Gratification Isn't Sense Gratification. And so we were discussing how sometimes sense gratification is required according to our level of Krishna consciousness, according to our level of advancement. Certain amounts of sense gratification are required so that we can be peaceful and so that we can focus on our Krishna consciousness. So in that sense, sense gratification is not really sense gratification. It's just a necessity of the body, and therefore we engage in quote-unquote sense gratification to the degree that's required so that we can focus on Krishna consciousness, and obviously we don't engage in any sinful activity. So the word sense gratification, it has a very negative connotation. But if I'm satisfying my senses so that I can be in a position to satisfy Krishna's senses, it's not really sense gratification. It's just, you could say, maintenance. But so then we were talking about, well, what should we pray for? That sometimes we pray or desire something which seems to be sense gratification, but actually it isn't. We're actually praying for pure devotional service, but we're sometimes praying for what we need for pure devotional service because that's where we're at. Yeah, like Prabhupada said, or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said, that if you're in danger, you'll pray to Krishna. And that apparently is not pure, but you're praying to maintain a body by which you'll serve him. Right? So you're going to serve Krishna with that body. So that's the body you're praying to maintain. So if you're in that consciousness that I'm praying for something for myself, whether it's maintenance or gratification or whatever I need, but I need it so I can serve you, then you're not really, in that sense, praying for sense gratification. And there's so many things we can pray for that we need in our devotional service. So that's what we talked about. So if you do not have any questions, I'm going to continue to read from statements by Srila Prabhupada. About how devotees pray. Okay? I don't see any questions. Okay. So we'll continue. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th Canto, 24th chapter, text 47. And this is a prayer by Maharaj Satyavrata. For material happiness, the conditioned soul involves himself in fruitive activities which actually put him into material distress. Because the conditioned soul does not know this, he is said to be in avidya, or ignorance. We do something to make us happy, but it puts us into stress, and we don't understand that the activity that we thought would make us happy is going to make us unhappy, and that is called avidya, or ignorance. Because of a false hope for happiness, the conditioned soul becomes involved in various plans for material activity. Here Maharaj Satyavrata prays that the Lord sever this hard knot of false happiness and thus become his supreme spiritual master. What's interesting is that sometimes devotees will pray to Krishna for happiness. They're not actually praying for happiness. There's a ghost back there. They're not actually praying for the happiness of sense gratification. But sometimes devotees will pray for happiness. They're praying for spiritual happiness, because that spiritual happiness is their connection, is their relationship with Krishna, their taste. And so they want to establish their relationship with Krishna through taste. And that taste is what impels that relationship. So we can pray for happiness. I mean, you might pray for material happiness, as we're saying, because it's just something you need to pacify you. But you can also pray for spiritual happiness. It's not spiritual taste. It's not a material desire. If it's done in the right consciousness. So, Krishna, I want to serve you. Please give me a taste. Give me that taste which will sever all my material attachments. That's the idea. So we have a question before, so I don't want to discuss this anymore at this point. I think that's clear. We could talk more about it. Well, okay, let's talk a few minutes and then I'll go back to your question. If I think, it said here, Maharaj Satyavrata is asking Krishna, please sever my desire for false happiness, the knot of happiness, sever the hard knot of happiness. So what he's saying is, sever this knot that impels me to want to enjoy material happiness, or to even think that there is such a thing as material happiness, or to think that certain things will bring me happiness. Sever any knot that's impelling me to do anything other than try to satisfy your senses, to think that there's any way to get happiness outside of a relationship with you. And we all think that way. And that's what we were thinking when we came to the material world. So naturally, we still think that way because that momentum is there. As long as we're in the material world, that momentum is there. So he's praying, please sever that kind of thinking. Yes? Yeah, I recognize that I'm thinking in a certain way that is an impediment to my bhakti. And so, Krishna, can you sever anything I'm attached to that's going to be pulling me away from you? This is a nice meditation. It's a nice prayer. I only want pure devotional service, and anything that I'm attached to, anything that I think will make me happy. Krishna, can you show me that it won't make me? Can you reveal to me? Can you make me feel, understand, appreciate that will never make? Can you bring me to this point that when I look at it, I see there's no happiness there, or even when I look at it, I see there's actually potential misery there. Can you make me feel that? Can you make me see that? When I see these objects of attachment, can you neutralize them? Can you nullify them so that when I look at them, it's kind of like the flavor has been extracted. So I see it as like chewing gum that has been chewed. When I look at it, there's nothing. I don't see anything there. Because the problem that we have is that we see something there that isn't there. Anytime we're allured by anything material, it's because we see something there, that we have some assumption that it will give me a certain amount of happiness or pleasure or satisfaction. And we're illusioned by what it is, and what we think is there is not actually there. And so we're running after something which isn't there, which is why we never find it. Krishna, can you show me that it's not there so I don't have to run after it? Can you show me the actual naked form of material nature? Can you show it to me as it is, not as I would like it to be, not as I'm illusioned to see it, not as I hope it would be. It's like a bubble. You go to catch a bubble and then it disappears. It's not solid. It's not. You can't hold on to it, at least not for long. And so many things in this world are like that. We're not attracted to them. We're attracted to the illusion of what they are. We're not actually attracted to what it is. it's sometimes difficult to understand that, but if you can remember what you're attracted to is the illusion of what it is, not what it is. And if Krishna can show you what it is, then you won't be attracted to it. So Krishna, please show me the actual nature of the material world. Show me or dispel the illusion of of the happiness that I think that I could get from these things that I'm attracted to. Show me that it's not really there. It just seems to be there. It promises to be there. It looks like it's there. But it's not. It's like, I don't know if you've ever been to a wax museum or seen pictures. But they make these models of famous persons out of wax, and they're so realistic you might actually think they're there. There's actually an art form, I think it's using fiberglass, where they can simulate skin and it looks real. You don't even know it's not skin. And there's an artist I've seen who's done this. So it's not like Prabhupada's murti. It's almost like a photo. Maybe it's a photograph of skin that I don't know how they do it. But it looks like it's scary because it actually looks like a real person because it looks like real skin. That's very scary. So Maya is something like that. You think you're getting something that you're not getting. It's an illusion in your mind of what it is. So you're looking at it and thinking, this is this, and therefore this will produce this kind of happiness. But the this that you're thinking is this is not this. That's what Maya means. Maya means not this. It's not what you think you're getting. And I was thinking of an example. We did Sankirtan once. It was at a fair in San Diego, and outside the fair this man was selling these big balloons. You blow them up. And so he was holding a big balloon, but what we found out later is what he was selling was a balloon that was not that big. So he's holding up this big balloon, and what you're buying is a smaller balloon. So you blow your balloon up, it's like this, but his balloon was like huge. So I was thinking of that example last week for some reason, or 2 weeks ago, I don't know why. But the idea was, Maya's like that. You think you're getting the big balloon, but you just get the little one. So you do get some satisfaction. But you bought the big balloon, and this little balloon, if you saw it, how small it is, you wouldn't have bought it, because it's not really what you want. So that's the idea. That you're not getting what you think you're getting. It's really well packaged. And you think you're getting something that you're not getting. So Krishna, please, please sever that attachment, sever that illusion, dispel that illusion. So that I don't look at material things and think there's something there that isn't. Because once I see it as it is, that will produce a natural detachment. And that's the difficulty we have. And that's why Prabhupada has given us so many books, because he wants us to see it as it is. In Maya, when we're in Maya, we will not see it according to the way Prabhupada has taught us to see it. We'll see it through the eyes of sense gratification, of how we can enjoy it and how it'll make us happy. How there's something there. We're actually in such a pathetic situation that we're so thirsty for sense gratification that we'll even see the opportunities for sense gratification in anything. Just get a drop of it somewhere. We'll see it even when it doesn't exist, where there's practically nothing. And we're so starved of enjoyment that we're willing to make so many sacrifices and do so many things just to get it. Isn't that crazy? And all that energy could be used in devotional service instead of contemplating how I can be happy. Okay, so I'm going to read the questions now, or the comments. So I'm going to have to come closer to read this. Excuse me. One devotee was mentioning how they felt a bit guilty about something they purchased. Well, I should have been more renounced. I could have spent more money for Krishna if I didn't buy this? Somehow I can't remember the exact details. But sometimes we think we need something that we later feel guilty about, yes, or are unsure of. Could this be a sign they didn't actually need this or that? Just a kind of material insecurity, depending on the case. Well, I think it's great that they realized they didn't need it. Our generation today thinks more about what we want than what we need. So just the fact that this person was thinking about what they need, that's really good. I like that. And okay, well, most of what we have we don't need. So the chances of what she bought or he bought, he or she not needing it, are like 80%. So, they say that about 80% of what we have we don't need. Like, if we didn't have it, we'd be okay. We could exist. Now, there's certain things we need for our devotional service, and if we actually need them, then Prabhupada wanted us to buy them and buy good quality, because we're going to use that in Krishna service, and that has nothing to do with sense gratification. But for ourselves, yeah, there's so many things we don't need. And it's wonderful that she recognizes that she doesn't need it. The other recognition is that she could have, or someone could have, is that I know I buy things I don't need because of whatever reason, like you say, because of insecurity, that could be, or because of my conditioning. I just need to have a lot of things, nice things, and so forth. And for some people, that kind of detachment is going to take time, because sometimes we realize this is the situation and we're trying to control it, but when we get in the store, we lose control. We feel like I need to buy things because buying things will make me happy. There's this, this belief that's operating under this problem, is that buying things will make me happy, and if I have money, I should have a lot of things. Other people have a lot of things. It's the more you have, the better, and so on. So there's so many things operating. And the interesting thing is that as devotees, we're supposed to understand these things and gradually overcome it, but we find that we don't. One of the most interesting realizations you could have in Krishna consciousness is to find out that there are people who aren't devotees who are more renounced than you. There are people who aren't devotees who live more simply than you. There are people who aren't devotees who are more humble than you. There are people who are not devotees who are more self-controlled, kinder, less envious or jealous. It's such an interesting realization to have. But what it means is that we all have our conditioned nature. So maybe my conditioned nature is to accumulate. And our Shastra says, don't accumulate more than you need. And so maybe this devotee that you're talking about realized he bought something she didn't need. Maybe she's bought millions of things and now she's realizing it, and so that's part of the progress. I think inherent in your question also is, should she feel guilty about it? And if she actually doesn't need it and it's just a waste of money, or it's a deviation, yeah, she should feel guilty, take it back, and she could use that money in Krishna service. I think that's the important point. It's an interesting point, because every cent you don't spend on something you want, you could spend in Krishna service. But at the same time, as we were saying yesterday, sometimes people need They just need to do this to get it out of their blood. So sometimes we might do something which is not ideal to get it out of our blood so that we can actually do it. All right, now I bought this, I bought that. Okay, now I've got it all. Okay, I'm going to stop shopping, just forget. I know I didn't really need it, but it's nice to have. And I had a 32-inch television. Now I went out and bought a 62-inch. I didn't really need it. Does anyone really need a 62 or 72 or 84, or whatever they are? No, you don't. But everyone's house, every one of your friends has a 72-inch or 84. So you buy one just because you feel like you're missing out. Okay. Get out of your blood, forget about it. But in the ultimate scheme of things, it would be nice if the devotees were the ones who were most renounced, if the devotees were the ones who lived the most simple lives, who were the kindest, most humble, and so forth. Don't you agree? Isn't that, ideally where we should be? At least shooting for, or at least a large percentage of initiated devotees should be on that level. Now, there's another way we could look at it is, was that devotee initiated or not initiated? Because when you become initiated, then a little more renunciation should be there. I know that may not be the way it is, and we're discussing that. But in the ideal world, those who are initiated should be living a little more strictly and a little more renounced. Now, I know many great devotees who have a lot of stuff in their house that they don't need. And the reason they have is because they make a lot of money. And they're from India, and they could never live this way in India. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just like natural for them that I came here to make money, now I have it. So let me just spend it, because that's why I came here. So it's kind of like there's a momentum. But I think, again, if someone is serious in Krishna consciousness, even if they do that, at some stage they'll grow out of it. So that's another way of looking at it. Okay, let's read on, see what you say. Kamalaksha. One example you gave yesterday. This devotee bought the BMW instead of the Ford to get to zero. What if then, after buying the BMW, they feel guilty and spend too much time thinking about they should have used for Krishna? Yeah. Then return it and buy the Ford. Yeah. Or now that you have the BMW, then you have to be the one who picks up all the devotees from the airport because you have the best car. So then you have to figure out, okay, I shouldn't have bought it, but now what's my excuse? Well, I can take the Maharajas who are visiting from temple to temple because I can drive fast in my BMW and they'll be comfortable. Anyway, if you do feel guilty, then it's a lesson that, what was I thinking of? And there'll be other devotees who will buy it and they won't think anything of it. They'll just think, yeah, it's a good car and we should have good cars, so I bought it. Now, Prabhupada was, he was a combination of being very cautious about spending money, but also wanting to spend money on good quality products. So he liked that we had good things, especially if we take care of them, and we can utilize them for Krishna. So if you lament, if you feel guilty, then that's a lesson to you that you realize that you would, according to your consciousness, you would prefer to use that money in Krishna's service. Or somebody else may think, well, I already give money in Krishna's service, and this is a good car, so we'll just use it. And they don't think beyond that. So, and they're not using that car for sense gratification. Now, buying a sports car, I don't know about that. That's, I mean, certain things are designed for, they're not practical, they're designed for sense enjoyment. Sports cars are good, fun to drive, and if you have one and you're a guy, you can get beautiful women because they'll think, wow, this guy has this amazingly expensive, beautiful car, and I can be seen sitting in it. So, some things are designed specifically for sense gratification. Now, if they feel guilty that they spend too much time thinking about, that could have been used for Krishna. The guilt, yes, guilt is good, but guilt is bad because it can deviate you. But guilt also is meant to enlighten you. So both things are there. It's a very interesting topic because you could approach it in different ways. One way you could approach it is, no, you shouldn't buy the BMW. It's a waste of money. For that extra 10,000 you spend, you could give that to the BBT. So that's a very good argument. Unless you're already giving 10,000 to the BBT, then it's not such a good argument, but you understand the principle. So I think another principle where we can get sidetracked here is that we could become judgmental. When someone buys something expensive, like, why did you need to spend that money? Usually the answer is, because I had it. Why do you need such a big house? Because I could afford it. I don't, but I could afford it. And so usually people with a lot of money are the ones who have the big houses. They don't have bigger families, they just have bigger houses. Why? Because they have more money and they can afford it. So if you can afford it, get a bigger house. Why? Because there's no reason. That's the point. There's no reason. You don't need it. The only reason is you can afford it. So you do it. And then, in some parts of the country, you can get huge houses for the price of a little condo in the city. Okay, so let's do that. Do you need it? No. But why did you do it? Because it didn't cost much, so we did it. So there may be so many reasons which are not wrong or bad. So that's one angle of vision. It's just we are being who we are, and that's just who we are. And so, what do we do in the house? That's what's important. Not how many square feet, how much it costs, as much as what do you do there. So that's one angle of vision. Then there's another angle of vision, which many devotees ascribe to. I don't know many devotees, but I don't know percentage-wise, but many, the idea that we should be living simply, because that's our philosophy, that we shouldn't be buying or building big houses, we shouldn't be buying big cars, we should be driving alternative energy cars, smaller cars, smart cars, riding bicycles. We should be doing things that reflect what we believe, not using styrofoam, plastic, spoons and plates, but biodegradable plates and spoons. We shouldn't be doing anything which doesn't exemplify what we teach, what we believe. So that's another school of thought. And the problem with that school of thought, if there is a problem with it, is not everybody can do it. And secondly, we can become judgmental upon those that don't do it, or who we determine or decide don't do it. Not we decide, but who we determine are not living up to our standards. So then that can become dangerous. As we said before, renunciation is something which happens naturally. So can you really force people to be renounced if they're not? And do you need to worry about their renunciation? No, you need to worry about your own. So for yourself, then you have to look at what you need, what don't you need, what do you have, can you use that in Krishna's service, otherwise why do you need it, why do you have to have it? So that's how we should think ourselves. And yes, we should live more simply. Do all devotees live simply? No. Do all devotees Do many devotees have more than they need? Yes. Do many non-devotees have more than they need? No. Again, we go back to that dichotomy, that some non-devotees are living practices of Krishna consciousness better than we are, and they don't even know they are. Their lives are simpler than many of the lives of devotees. Maybe there are non-devotees that don't watch TV, and maybe there are devotees that do watch TV. Maybe there are non-devotees that get up every morning very early and pray, and maybe there are devotees that don't. So yes, we should be aligned with what we believe. We should not be outdone by people in general. We should be more simple and so on. At the same time, because we're individual, that's probably never going to happen. That some people just need to live simply. It drives them crazy if they have a big house and big cars and this and that. They don't like it. And that's great, because that's conducive to Krishna consciousness. Keep it simple. And there are going to be some devotees that's just their nature. Don't even think about it. They're just big homes, big cars, lots of this, lots of that. It's just how they live. It doesn't bother them. They don't feel guilty. And it's just what they need. And so I think that's always going to be there. But still, if you're initiated, there should be some standard. So you don't become too extravagant. Now, I often have said, I don't know if you ever heard me, I'd say to my wife, she doesn't like it when I say this, I'd say if Prabhupada were still here, things would be different. They would look different. Of course, she agrees with that. But specifically how they would look different is in relation to this conversation we're having. If Prabhupada were here, things would look different according to our lifestyle and our standard of living. It would be simpler. I can pretty much bet if Prabhupada were still here, all our lives would be more simple. We would be utilizing more of our time and energy in devotional service, and if our lives get complicated, it takes away from that. Doesn't it? It's a lot easier to maintain a 1,500 square foot home than a 5,000 square foot home. It's a lot easier to pay for it. Isn't it? Yes. So if Prabhupada were here, we would be living more simply, I believe. I'm convinced of that. Because that's what Prabhupada preached. But now, because so many professional Indians are coming from India to the West and are earning well, and they've come to the West to live a better life, it's very difficult for them to live simple because it goes counter to like everything that like they're coming to the West stood for. So even if they are simple internally, it's harder for them to be simple often than it is for us, because we're born in America, so it's not our MO is not necessarily to live materially a very comfortable life. It may be, it may not be, but I think for Indians, it's just more natural. I'm not faulting them. I'm just observing that, if I were Indian, I'd probably be in the same position. I come all the way to America. I have this incredible job. And I'm, going to donate all my money to charity and live in a one-bedroom apartment, sleep on the floor. It's not why I came to America. But gradually, even those Indians, as they get older, they'll become more renounced, having fulfilled that American dream or American nightmare, however it works out for them. Having fulfilled that, they'll be okay. And I think the real crucial thing would be then. But when you're 75, what are you doing? Are you still expanding? Have you simplified? So as we get older, we should simplify. That's the point. And so when you do it, you might do it your entire life. It might take you till you're older. I think we have to avoid criticizing devotees who find various standards of living suitable for them, and actually just focus on their devotion and how they're serving, and the judgments about their standards of living, that's left up to their spiritual master or to others. Guru Maharaj, I got a bonus, $100,000 bonus. What should I do? Give it to Mayapur. Yeah, that's what he'll tell them. Or, well, let's build a temple here, or let's invest that money in various preaching projects. So that's nice. That attitude is nice. I'm very so I was making the point of the Indians because when the movement was growing up, we didn't have an Indian congregation, so we were all hippies. And so basically we're very poor and very just interested in material life. And even after we got married, we didn't really pursue it that well. And then the Indians had come to America to pursue it, and so they're quite well off, and they bring a lot of wealth and a different standard of living into our congregations. And so it's changed the climate a little bit in terms of the standard of living of your average congregational member now as opposed to what it was when Prabhupada was here. And so it's changed the face of ISKCON a bit. And is it right or is it wrong? It just is. And so many of these Indian devotees are just amazing devotees, amazingly devoted. They're doing so much service, giving so much money. So I would never fault them, and we just have to be careful not to judge. And I've been to the homes of Indians, some of who are professionals, doctors, and lawyers, and owners of companies, and they have beautiful homes. But they're not living lives of sense gratification too much. They're living, the way I see it is they're living what they came to America to live, and it would be in so many ways a paradox if they didn't. They finally laid this good job and they just had this very small, simple house. It doesn't make sense. Their children may be different, their grandchildren may be different, being raised in America. So yes, in many cases, you could say what these devotees have is what some devotees might think is over the top, excessive. We don't need it. But from what I've seen, it doesn't seem to be hindering their service. Or if it's hindering it, it doesn't seem to be hindering it much. So that's, I don't know, what's that, a study in sociology of people being educated in India, coming to America, or Indians getting their education in America and staying here, and how their lifestyles change and how they think differently from Americans. In some ways they think the same, and in some ways different. But specifically they think a little bit different than American devotees in terms of money. And that's just a social conditioning. And Prabhupada recognized that. And so Prabhupada encouraged. Prabhupada never judged. He just encouraged people to do devotional service. So I think this question of feeling guilty, it's something we all have to deal with. And, for you, what's right, you may buy that BMW and think, hey, this is really good. I really like it. I enjoy this car. It's safe. And I'm very happy to use it to pick up the devotees coming into the airport, the senior devotees coming, driving them around. It's very comfortable. They'll enjoy it. It's good for their back. Seats are warm in the winter. All these, it's all right. You may think like that, or you may think, I wasted money. It depends on you. I don't think there's a right or wrong per se. Although I understand some devotees can analyze this as right or wrong according to Shastra. And I don't entirely disagree with them also, because you can do that and say, well, you can get around in a simpler car. You don't need this car, and you should have bought an electric car, and et cetera, et cetera. Actually, you should have just got a bull and a cart or a horse. That's more Krishna conscious. And that's true. It is. Or you should just ride a bicycle to work, which is true. If it's not far, that's better. So my concern, as I said before, is that we don't become judgmental, because I think that's really dangerous and it's really destructive to our movement. We're all judging one another by how much we're spending and what we're spending it on. Anyway, They're usually the devotees that are living these nice lives, that are making a lot of money, are often the most generous and give the most to build temples to Mayapur, to the sannyasis and so on. So that's wonderful. Isn't it? Okay. So, amazingly, we just finished an hour. I don't even know if I said anything significant in this hour, but we covered two topics. So we covered yesterday's topic and elaborated on it, and I don't know if I've really helped you think it out, but if you're going to take anything away from me, I think the idea is that every devotee has to evaluate themselves, where they're at, and what they need, and what is too much, and what is not enough. Even though we can say there are standards, objective standards in Prabhupada's books about what is too much, still that's going to be relative to an individual's needs. But the idea is that at least at the end of life, when we retire, we should simplify. And we should be focused on Krishna consciousness. If you need to live on a very high standard, okay, do it. Don't get distracted by doing it. But eventually, we'll need to renounce. And we should leave that up to the individuals to decide and not judge them. And as I said, usually people build homes or people buy or rent according to what they can afford. So naturally, those who are making more money, they can afford more, so they think, why not? Most of them think like that. They don't think, all right, 2-bedroom house for our family of 5. We'll save a few $100,000 and we'll buy a few $100,000 worth of books. I mean, that would be great. If all of ISKCON were like that, it'd be fantastic. But it's not. It's probably not going to be. And everyone's going to find their own place. And for it to be that way, we'd have to have an energy within our movement that is just, it's just so high and so strong, so focused on preaching and renunciation that nobody would think of doing that. And as I said, that's why I think if Prabhupada were here, things would be different, because that energy existed when Prabhupada was here. Everything was focused on preaching. We weren't focused on our homes or our cars or so many of these things. We're focused on how I can utilize everything for preaching. So, you can't imitate the environment that existed during Prabhupada's time. I mean, you can try to create it as best you can, but for people to live on a high level of renunciation, there has to be a high energy in ISKCON. And I don't think it's fair to judge people. When we ourselves, we don't have that kind of energy, that would cause people to be more renounced. You know what I mean? Like we're saying, you should be more, you out there, all of you should be more renounced. But can I inspire you by my own spiritual advancement to be renounced? It's how I live, is what I say, is what I do. Does that inspire you? Can I inspire you to give up more of your time, energy, and money to the service of Krishna? And if I can, you'll do it. And if you don't, it's not my position to criticize you, because I understand you have your needs, and I understand the level of consciousness that exists within our movement. And it was a very special time when Prabhupada was here. And yes, we should want to get that energy, that preaching energy that we had during Prabhupada's time, that kind of sacrifice and surrender. We should want to get that rolling, up and rolling. And can we get it up and rolling? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe to some degree, more or less to some degree. But it is what it is. And we should honor and appreciate everyone. And as humble devotees, we should always think others are better. So judgment means you put yourself above, and that's why it's dangerous. And humility means you put others above, and that's why it's safe. So, it's a fine line, because sometimes you have to analyze things philosophically, but in analyzing things philosophically, you may be critical of people. So if you analyze it and just say, this is right, this is wrong, without thinking of specific people, that's okay. But when you bring in people, it gets a little touchy, because then we're going to put ourselves above them. But we're actually supposed to analyze ourselves in relation to what we're learning, and that we often don't do. Often we look at the philosophy and then we analyze other people according to the philosophy. We judge others according to those principles. Isn't it? And that is wrong. And that's a pitfall. Like, you read Prabhupada's books and he'll say so many things, and then you start thinking about all the people or all the devotees who are not living up to that standard. Okay, that might be a concern, that maybe our society in general is becoming substandard. But the dangerous side is that you don't look at yourself in relation to what Prabhupada is teaching. You're more focused on others. And that can lead to pride and being judgmental and so forth. So that's always going to be an issue. And even more of an issue sometimes when you become more Krishna conscious. Because the more you advance, the more there can be the tendency to see that others are not advanced, and then you judge them. You understand what I'm saying? Have you had that experience? It's like the better you become at something, the more you notice others are not better. Or the more you want them to be better, the more upset you are that they're not better. So being better can become dangerous, because it can cause us to judge others. In the same way, sometimes we say having too much knowledge is dangerous, because then you understand how much knowledge some people don't have. And you think, oh, they're foolish, or they don't understand Krishna consciousness well. I understand it well. They don't. They're lacking. So knowledge can be dangerous because it can make us proud. Then we think we know. When we think we know more, or we may know more, not think, we become proud that we know more. It doesn't mean, knowing more doesn't mean you're better. It just means you know more. Knowing more doesn't mean you're more pure. It just means you understand things better. It doesn't mean you live better. And then the real paradox is, if you actually have more knowledge, you would become more humble, not more proud. And so we often see that people with knowledge become proud. They don't become humble. But knowledge should make us humble. So if knowledge makes us proud, then what did we understand? So, it's like being judgmental. It's so pervasive. It's so subtle. It's just everywhere. Because of our pride. We tend to put ourselves above others. So we have to be careful when we're analyzing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. What's right, what's wrong, who's up, who's in the middle, who's down. That it doesn't become the cause of us making offenses to others. So Prabhupada wanted this, and you're not doing this, and this is what's wrong with you. That's a dangerous way of thinking, don't you think? It's so easy to fall into that trap. The better you become, the more you know. The easier it is to fall into that trap. So somehow, even when we see someone that's doing something which, according to our philosophy, is inferior to what we're doing, we have to be able to be appreciative and respectful of them, and not put ourselves on a pedestal to judge them. Now, as preachers, as gurus, as leaders, sometimes we have to do that. But when that's not our position, then sometimes the best words spoken are no words at all. And that's good advice. Sometimes the best words are no words. Sometimes the best response to anger is no response. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is silence, because if you say something critical or you say something when you're angry, it's better you don't say it. I don't know if it was Mickey Mouse who said this, or Mickey Mouse's right-hand man. But I always remember this because I used to watch the Mickey Mouse show when I was a kid. I think it was on every day, and I think I watched it every day. And their tagline, their motto was, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it. Don't say anything if you don't have something nice to say. It's good advice, isn't it? If all the devotees followed Mickey Mouse, we'd be doing really good. Don't you think? Yeah, I think Mickey Mouse should become president. That's good advice. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. And it's so funny because Mickey Mouse is a show for kids. You know, I'm sure I was like really young when I watched it. And that's such good advice for adults. So much of the good advice we get as kids, we should, if we followed it as adults, we'd be doing really good. So, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, I hope I clarified it. I'm just trying to balance it. And I fully appreciate that there's some devotees who just want to establish the strict side. Is that no, we've deviated from where Prabhupada wants us to be, from where we were with him, and we're not aligned enough with what Prabhupada's teaching. I totally understand that, and I totally agree with it, and I feel it all the time. I wish our I wish in our movement everyone was more simple, more humble, more kind, more compassionate, more self-controlled, more austere, more of this and that than everyone else in the world. And I know that's what Prabhupada wants, but that's not going to happen because we're works in progress. And like I was saying, at the end of our life, yes, we should be. We should be exemplary. During our life, we're all different. We're in different stages. And therefore, you're going to find non-devotees. Some will be more simple than devotees. Some will be kinder, more humble, more self-controlled. That's a reality we have to face. But Prabhupada's point is the devotees giving everything to Krishna, giving their life to Krishna, so they're the best. Even if externally they're not the best, they're the best, because they're doing the best thing, which will ultimately produce the best result. And the other people are humble, kind, and so forth, but that humility and kindness, it's not necessarily going to lead them to Krishna consciousness. So in that sense, it may just be a shadow of humility, a shadow of kindness, which doesn't take them anywhere. So the devotee, with their minuscule humility and their minuscule simplicity, is still better off in the long run. Now, when that's the person who's very humble, very simple, and so when he becomes a devotee, then he's in an advantage, because those are the qualities that we should be living, at least getting to. Okay, so why don't we stop here? And for those of you interested, tomorrow at 6:15 Eastern Standard Time, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes earlier than we started today, we'll be giving a class specifically for the devotees in Australia, but you're all invited. And that class, it could be on the topic of love, of the devotee's love for Radharani. That's another topic, but it's kind of esoteric, and I don't know if you're ready for it. But so I'm thinking about whether we're going to talk about that. And if we don't, then we're going to start a new topic, which will be very interesting and very helpful. It's a topic about the different ways we respond according to things that come to us according to our natures. And then we're going to kind of profile different responses, all which get us into trouble. It's going to be interesting, believe me. It's going to be really interesting. In fact, we're going to write a whole book about it. We just haven't thought of the name of the book yet, I don't think. Okay, I guess it's time. This is my daughter's room where she's staying, and she's peeking in, so we will go. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.